At 600 hours local time, a formation of F-15 Strike Eagles roared through the skies toward Syrian airspace, their mission clear and resolute: obliterate 70 command posts listed as hostile targets. Last week's assault on American forces had been orchestrated from these very locations, though the extremists believed themselves well concealed. Yet, during the grueling 6 hours that followed, these pilots and artillery crews would uncover something hidden deep within their designated targets. An elusive prize intelligence analysts had sought for 3 long years. At precisely 647 local time, the first F-15s crossed the Syrian border. Immediately, the eyes of the weapon system officers, known as WISOs, snapped to the radar warning receivers. A Syrian early warning radar was in operation, an S-band system that fed precise targeting data to surface-to-air missile batteries. The pilot maintained steady course. If that radar was actively channeling information to a SAM battery, they would have mere seconds to respond. 6 seconds, to be exact, before the radar completed its sweep. And as the radar blinked off, the WISOs exhaled in relief. The confliction had held for now, but this window of safety was rapidly closing. Syrian air defense crews were scheduled to shift 700, just 38 minutes away, and the incoming team had not been briefed on this operation. Every minute past that deadline raised the risk of a catastrophic friendly fire incident, a mistake that could terminate the mission and end careers. Below them, the vast Syrian desert stretched out, a sea of sand and ridgelines, barely distinguishable from the countless similar formations nearby. Concealed within this barren expanse lay the network of command posts that had masterminded the recent attack against U.S. and Allied forces. In a few heartbeats, these nerve centers would be reduced to nothing more than smoking craters. In the lead F-15, the weapons systems officer, the WISO, the man in the backseat responsible for delivering decisive destruction, activated the AAQ-33 sniper targeting pod. The infrared display locked onto a rugged ridgeline compound 40 kilometers ahead. Multiple structures clustered tightly around a central building, with heat signatures seeping from vents, exactly the kind of underground spaces intelligence analysts had predicted. Yet, matching coordinates alone did not guarantee a confirmed target. The APG-82 radar alerted the WISOs that something was present, but it could not reveal the nature or significance of the find. The unforgiving desert terrain masked everything. Ridgelines melted into ground clutter, buildings blended seamlessly into rock formations. The razor-thin line between an active command post and one abandoned just 6 hours earlier existed only in human discernment. The WISO meticulously cross-referenced radar returns with satellite imagery, scrutinized thermal signatures against last night's reconnaissance flights, and asked the ultimate question: was this the right target? Taking an unconfirmed shot risked wasting a $25,000 weapon on empty structures. A mistaken strike could ignite an international incident broadcasted on CNN before dawn. 5 intense seconds passed in this calculation. A fleeting moment where a 2,000-pound bomb's fate hinged on pattern recognition and disciplined paranoia. The verdict returned clean. This target was genuine. Yet the folder held 69 additional aim points. Not all were suitable for F-15 strikes, but this one most certainly was. The WISO calmly uttered a single word: rifle. Immediately, the GBU-31 slipped from the aircraft, its tail fins dynamically adjusting over 50 times per second, battling gravity and wind as it surged toward the designated target. Next, the aircraft battles wind shear and thermal gradients, while its GPS system triangulates its position with astounding precision within 3 meters. However, when GPS signals are jammed, a situation that occurs more often than the Air Force publicly acknowledges, the bomb seamlessly switches to inertial guidance. Though less precise, it still achieves an accuracy of about 15 meters, sufficient to accomplish its mission. The pilot banked left, eyes elsewhere. There was no need to watch. The Strike Eagle would be safely 15 kilometers away by the time the bomb struck. Thanks to its tail kit, the GBU-1 benefits from an impressive glide ratio, allowing it to travel miles horizontally from high altitude. This standoff delivery lets the crew simply drop the weapon and trust the geometry of the flight path to do the rest. Just 28 seconds remain until impact. At 6:48 local time, everything culminates precisely. The targeting pod registers the strike as a sudden flash, followed quickly by a swelling bloom of gray smoke that overtakes the infrared display. The impact, unleashed, £945 of Tritonel, obliterating a command post and transforming it into an expanding sphere of overpressure and shattered fragments. The blast wave tore through structures designed to evade satellite detection, buildings never engineered to withstand destruction guided directly by those very satellites. Yet, there's no time to bask in the achievement, as fuel remains finite, and the target folders still hold 69 aim points waiting to be engaged by EO local. The Strike Eagles have turned 19 parking lots scattered throughout Syria into ruin. Even so, the target list is not shrinking quickly enough. The difficulty lies in the terrain. GPS-guided bombs deliver surgical precision when striking compounds situated in the open desert. However, about half of the remaining targets hide within valleys, where the distance between enemy command posts and neighboring hillsides is narrower than the bomb's margin of error. Adding to the challenge, some targets emit thermal signatures that deviate from intelligence photos. Structures that may be legitimate enemy positions could be housing civilians or might be entirely vacant. From an altitude of 25,000 feet, the sensors can detect heat, but cannot interpret intent. For those ambiguous targets, someone must get close enough to observe munitions impacting and guide them onto the mark in real time. At 9:00 local, 2 A-10 Thunderbolts cross the border, advancing northbound at 15,000 feet. They are deployed for targets that require human eyes to confirm amid terrain too treacherous for fast movers. The Air Force had brought in the ugliest but most effective close air support platform ever constructed. For 2 hours, the Strike Eagles have been whittling down the target list, with results clear even from high altitude. Thermal blooms mark where command posts stood, and secondary fires still smolder within mountain compounds. However, the A-10 pilots have a distinct mission. They are like hunting dogs unleashed after the initial shots, sent in when the prey is fully alerted. The lead A-10 pilot begins descending toward a ridgeline previously flagged as probable weapons storage that requires visual confirmation. At 8,000 feet, the targeting pod sharpens the view. But all. It reveals a reinforced structure nestled into the hillside, ventilation pipes hinting at underground storage, and a thermal signature betraying a building desperately trying to remain hidden. Yet, the GAU-8 Avenger cannon of the A-10 doesn't merely unleash destruction, it fights back as well. Its 7-barrel rotary cannon produces nearly 5 tons of recoil, enough to slow the aircraft by 20 knots, and forcefully push the nose off course, if not managed properly. You might not realize it at first, but the Air Force didn't just slap a gun onto an airplane. Instead, they built the entire aircraft around that gun, dedicating 4 decades to training pilots on how to skillfully manage it. As the pilot zeroes in on the target, their mind isn't on the enemy, but on controlling this powerful weapon. Why? Because the gun isn't mounted where the pilot would expect. It's actually positioned 2 feet left of the aircraft's center line. Even more fascinating is how the firing barrel rotates into the 9-0 position when firing, placing the active barrel exactly along the plane's center axis. This means that for 40 years, pilots have been aiming with an offset sight, yet consistently hitting their targets, thanks to meticulous engineering foresight. Picture the pilot diving in, the nose tipping down toward the target, airspeed climbing steadily. At around 6,000 feet altitude, the pipper, the aiming reticle projected onto the heads-up display, locks onto the entrance of a bunker. Suddenly, a violent barrage erupts. 70 rounds per second of depleted uranium and high explosives tear through the air. Far too fast for the human ear to distinguish individual shots. The cockpit trembles under the recoil. The speed momentarily decreases. The pilot keeps the trigger pressed precisely for 2 seconds before easing off and pulling away, mindful of the laws of physics and the danger of overstaying in the dive. Meanwhile, concealed along a ridge, a militia fighter who had painstakingly camouflaged his SA-7 surface-to-air missile position for 3 days watches silently. He'd seen 2 strike eagles pass overhead earlier without firing. Patiently waiting for the slower, low-flying target, his Soviet-era manual-guided missile was designed to engage. The unmistakable roar of the A-10's engine echoing through the canyon was exactly the signal he'd been anticipating. Then, suddenly, the missile warning receiver blinks on aboard the aircraft. Launch detection bearing 170 degrees. Something fired, and its path is off the beaten track. Here's where the limitations of man-portable air defense systems like the SA-7 Grail come into play. Developed in 1968, the missile uses an uncooled infrared seeker that simply homes in on the hottest signature in its field of vision. Back then, that's almost always meant the aircraft's engine. But the seeker cannot differentiate between hot and hotter. It blindly follows whatever shines the bright. The pilot reacts instantly, launching flares that burn at an intense 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Compare that to the A-10's turbofans, which operate around 600 degrees. To the missile's seeker, the flares don't just look like a better target. They look like the only target. The missile veers away from the plane and into empty sky, diverting disaster. That missile launch just lit up every sensor in the area. The once hidden man-portable launcher is now known and has inadvertently called in a 30mm hail of punishment. The A-10 doesn't hesitate, rolling back in for another pass. However, even this fearsome gun has its limitations. Some targets lie too far out or tucked away in difficult terrain where diving down means risking collision with canyon walls. For these situations, pilots rely on a different kind of weapon. Enter the A-10 AM-65 Maverick missile. Displayed here, this missile is the solution to challenges the gun cannot meet. Equipped with an infrared seeker in its nose, the Maverick views the battlefield through the lens of heat. Once the pilot designates a target, the seeker locks on with unyielding focus. This weapon exists solely to eliminate its designated mark. There's no need for the pilot to dive deep into hostile terrain. From as far as 4 miles away, he can identify a target like a logistics building, the infrared seeker detecting the warmth streaming from its thin metal roof. Confirming the correct thermal signature, the pilot squeezes the trigger, sending the missile on its precise and lethal path. The Maverick missile takes over from here, calculating its trajectory as it speeds off the rail, guided smartly toward its target. Meanwhile, the pilot is already prepping for the next strike. By 1,000 hours local time, the A-10 Warthogs have engaged 11 fixed enemy positions, using a versatile mix of devastating gun runs and precision missile strikes. The hit list has been trimmed down to 42 active targets. Just 3 hours remain before the operational window closes. Yet even these rugged Warthogs can't stay on station indefinitely. Fuel is running low. Pilots are growing weary, And the A-10's hallmark ability to fly slow and low means each aircraft covers limited territory before needing to withdraw for refueling from tankers. In the rugged mountains, extremists who have been hidden away for the last 4 hours are listening intently to the diminishing drone of engines. They count the fading silence and start calculating their window to relocate assets and vanish before the roar returns. But what they are about to discover is that silence is no guarantee of safety. Enter the 142 High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, or HIMARS. At first glance, it resembles a formidable, angry Penske truck, but appearances are deceiving. Inside, it carries 6 GPS-guided rockets, each capable of reaching targets 50 miles away with pinpoint accuracy down to mere meters. Unlike aircraft, the HIMARS doesn't need fuel or pilots' rest. It doesn't care about human limits or aerial tanking cycles. By 10:15 local time, 3 HIMARS launchers have taken position in the Jordanian desert, just 15 miles from the Syrian border. They've been stationary and silent for 4 hours, their crews closely monitoring aircraft patterns, observing Strike Eagles and Warthogs cycling on and off station, waiting for the perfect alignment of timing and geometry. That decisive moment has now arrived. Sustained air operations hinge on a brutal math problem just beyond Common Core difficulty. Aircraft burn fuel continuously, requiring tanker support for refueling. Each refueling cycle pulls planes off station for about 20 minutes, thinning target coverage. Mission planners strive to stagger rotations so there's always an aircraft overhead, but inevitable gaps remain. It's during these windows that hidden adversaries contemplate moving. HIMARS is designed precisely to fill those gaps with enough explosive firepower to challenge that decision. The crew receives fresh coordinates from the Tactical Operations Center, a staging area nearby where intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance are. Units have been tracking enemy movements for 30 minutes. The adversaries are gearing to move when they believe it's safe. They are about to be proven wrong. The HIMARS launcher elevates its pod, while the onboard fire control computer confirms the firing solution. Traditional artillery relies heavily on survey teams painstakingly pinpointing gun positions, a process taking hours and leaving conspicuous signatures. HIMARS operates differently. Knowing its exact GPS location, it computes its firing solution instantly and can set up on any flat patch of Earth, ready to strike within 5 minutes of arrival. No need for elaborate preparation or registration, just coordinates and swift consequences. With a fiery blast, the rocket rockets out of the pod, leaving a white-hot plume behind as it rockets skyward into the morning light. It will take roughly 90 seconds to reach its target. The launcher remains vigilant as the battle unfolds. The crew knows all too well, you have to move before the rocket even reaches apogee, that highest point in the trajectory. They've got a saying on HIMARS: shoot, scoot, or become a statistic. It's a brutally honest motto. Rocket artillery is a flashing beacon in the night, loud, bright, and glaringly obvious. The plume from a launch can be seen for miles around, making it impossible to hide. You don't need a fancy degree to figure out exactly where that rocket came from. All it takes is a pair of ears and a stopwatch. With those, anyone can detect the launch, calculate the flight path backward to the origin, and rain counterfire down on your spot long before you have a chance to get out of there. With mortars, things happen even faster. You have maybe 90 seconds from the moment the mortar rounds land until the enemy zeroes in on your firing position. In fact, by the time the first mortar shells explode, the launcher is already 1,000 meters away. The team just fired 4 rounds, tightly grouped, hitting an area about 300 meters wide, where HIMARS was just moments ago. The keyword there is was. American artillery crews have drilled displacement until it's second nature to them, almost like muscle memory. That mortar crew just spent artillery rounds they can't easily replace on a barren patch of dirt, a spot that now sits high on the enemy's priority list for counter-battery fire. By 11 hours local time, HIMARS has launched 12 rockets spread across 4 target zones. The target list has shrunk down to 31 aim points, leaving the toughest targets remaining, targets HIMARS simply cannot touch. These rockets are precise, accurate to single-digit meters, making them devastating against staging areas and vehicle parks. However, when it comes to a bunker entrance only visible from one specific vantage point, these rockets fall short. Some targets hide deep in canyon terrain where a GPS-guided weapon might strike the ridge above instead of the door below. Others require pinpoint shot placement, not just hitting a building, but hitting a specific window at a precise angle right at this moment. To tackle those, you need a different kind of weapon, something that can hover behind a ridgeline, peek over, and send a missile right through a doorway from 4 kilometers out. That's where the forward arming and refueling point, or FARP, comes into play. It's not marked on any map and is expected to vanish by tomorrow. Just 72 hours ago, this place was empty desert. Now it's a pulsating hub of fuel bladders, ammunition pallets, and 2 IS-64 Apaches sipping JP-8 jet fuel. The Army refers to this as expeditionary logistics, but pilots call it a gas station stocked with hellfires. At 11:15 local, the first Apache lifts off, immediately dropping to a precarious 200 feet, hugging the terrain in a way that would give any fixed-wing pilot nightmares. The helicopter doesn't climb. It glides forward, using ridgelines and dry riverbeds as cover. Beneath the canopy, rocks and scrub whirl by fast. There's no radar threat here, no missiles waiting in ambush. But there are still some highly motivated, though wildly inaccurate, adversaries armed with machine guns and RPGs. So the crew stay vigilant. At just 200 feet, the helicopter is within range of everything, including some harsh language from the crew. Suddenly, the Zu-23 opens fire from a ridgeline 800 meters out. Twin barrels churn out 23 mm rounds at a blistering 400 rounds per minute. These are Soviet surplus weapons, already obsolete when disco was still popular, but the age doesn't matter. The Zu-23's problem is that it's optically aimed on a target, detected by sound, basically like trying to shoot a blazing fast clay pigeon with a huge machine gun. The gunner is firing in desperation, but the pilot and crew move with precision, keeping low and using every bit of cover the terrain offers to stay out of harm's way. The helicopter wasn't where the rounds landed. They fell about 30 meters wide of the target. Close enough to make the pilot's heart race, but not close enough to cause any real damage. Yet that dust cloud and the muzzle flash marked the helicopter as the most visible presence in the valley. The TADS, Target Acquisition and Designation Site, locked on the moment the second burst fired. A laser painted the Technical's engine block, and just 4 seconds later, that position was nothing more than scattered spare parts strewn across the hillside. The Apache's main weapon in situations like this was the AGM-114 Hellfire missile. This laser-guided missile, ingeniously designed to obliterate tanks, proved exceptionally effective against a wide array of targets as well. Each Apache carried 16 Hellfires, but the true secret weapon wasn't just the missile itself, it was the gunner's eyes. The system's magnetic sensors tracked the gunner's helmet an astonishing 60 times per second. Wherever the gunner turned his head, the TADS turret followed. And when the gunner looked at a target through the chin bubble, the 30mm chain gun was already aligning perfectly on it. The line between human and machine focus completely blurred. The gunner's gaze was effectively the targeting system. At 11:40 local time, the first target appeared on the thermal display. It was a hardened bunker nestled into the hillside, about 4 kilometers away. A dark rectangle marked its entrance against the warmer surrounding rock. Intelligence reports had identified it as a weapons storage site. The thermal signature confirmed heat leaking from ventilation shafts despite efforts to conceal the interior, proof of a concerted attempt to hide critical assets. The pilot positioned the helicopter in a hover just behind a ridgeline, much like a curious dog peering cautiously over the dinner table, revealing only the rotor mast and sensors. The gunner steadied his crosshairs on the bunker's entrance. The laser illuminated the target. The Hellfire missile launched from the rail, locking onto the reflected laser energy. For 8 intense seconds, the gunner held the crosshairs steady, while the missile made precise adjustments, 40 times per second. 8 seconds might seem brief, but to a helicopter suspended, motionless, over hostile terrain, it was a lifetime. Hovering made the aircraft a vulnerable target. Then came impact. A brilliant white flash blossomed on the thermal display, erasing the bunker entrance. This was immediately followed by secondary explosions, confirming that the weapons inside were exactly what intelligence reports had promised. The Apache began sliding left, repositioning for the next shot. This time, it didn't even need direct visual contact with the target. The wingman helicopter could designate a laser from one angle while the shooter launched the missile from another. The Hellfire relentlessly followed the laser reflection, no matter which aircraft provided it. Targets thinking themselves safe from one direction suddenly found themselves struck from an entirely unexpected angle. This was cooperative geometry at its finest. The Apaches hunted like a pack. 2 more Hellfires fired, and 2 more enemy positions were reduced to rubble. This precise and discriminating close-range shooting was the job that other aircraft simply couldn't perform. It required the human eye operating mere 200 feet above the ground, rather than relying solely on sensor feeds from miles away. By 12:20, local time, the 2 Apaches had already returned twice to the forward arming and refueling point, FARP, to reload. Their turnarounds were a swift 11 minutes each, accomplished with no hangars or maintenance bays, just rapid, efficient roaming in austere conditions. At 12:30, they engaged the final target on their list. JDAM is dropped from a Strike Eagle on its 5th sortie of the morning. The bomb descends for 31 seconds, and the previous compound is now cleared, making it an ideal spot for a buys. Afterwards, the Wizzo reviews the target folder. Winchester, Tart. Signing off for now.